following the Supreme Court of Virginia decision on the referendum and the Supreme Court of the United States decision in Louisiana versus Calais, curbing race-based redistricting, Republican-led states are actively, aggressively pursuing mid-decade map changes, aiming to flip seats before the 2026 midterm elections. The state of Louisiana has already begun moving to dismantle a majority black district, while states like Alabama, Florida, Tennessee are already adjusting their maps, and South Carolina to reduce minority representation, causing significant volatility for the upcoming elections and elections to come. What does this mean for the Commonwealth? What does this mean for African Americans and vote dilution for other people of color? And what does this mean for our democracy? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric LaVille, and you're joining us for our Redistricting Referendum series. As always, I want to thank you for joining us as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WSB, Hot 91, the soul of VA. You know, we've had graduation, and graduations are continuing. So once again, congratulations to all graduates of this great institution and all others. And we hope that you go out into the world and you are prepared to make the change and make the difference. And we hope that all you mothers enjoyed your Mother's Day on last week. You know, joining us to discuss this important topic, because it is ever changing. There are many things that are happening. And let me tell you, we're experiencing a moment in time that I thought we would never experience. You know, so I had to get one of my good friends and colleagues who came in town, I want to say just for this show, but actually it wasn't. He just happened to be here. But he came in town, and I said, listen, you got to come in studio and really help us break this down. But my good friend, award-winning journalist, no stranger to this region here in Hampton Roads, none other than Dr. Will Levis. Will, how you doing this morning?
Hey, always a pleasure to be to my second home, Hampton Roads, Virginia. I happen to be in town for a wedding. Good friend of my son's and one of my other sons, Dexter Hills. I want to give a shout out to Dexter and his lovely wife Jasmine and their beautiful union. It's a beautiful thing to see. Young folks getting together, loving on each other, still seeing the value of marriage. You know, a black love is a beautiful thing, and they both live over in Portsmouth. So shout out to the Hills and their son Josiah. Beautiful family.
Shout out to P-Town.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Make me want to holler. How many people know that reference? I'll let y'all think about that.
You know, but Will, I mentioned you're no stranger to this region. Just to reintroduce yourself to our audience. Let them know, what your history making.
Absolutely.
Mark here in Hampton Roads. Well,
I first came to Hampton Roads. This is the early 2000s. Well, kind of midway 2000s. Seems so long ago, but yet so soon. Initially as the first black Metro columnist for the Daily Press, which is a Newport News-based newspaper. So I was on the other side of the peninsula side, other side of the water. And then, of course, I did that for a few years, and then had a radio show on WHOV, Hampton's radio station, Will Levis Show, where we initially connected. That's right. Started doing our rapport and have gone on from there. And so it's been a wonderful ride. Hampton Roads, definitely a second home.
Yeah, when you mentioned the Will Levis Show, it brought back memories, because you and Barbara Hamley gave me my first start.
Absolutely, yeah.
In radio. Barbara gave me my first start actually appearing on the show, but it was really working with you inside that little small studio, where we would have these talks like we're having now.
And I think that's actually how we connected, was on Barbara's show, because I'm one of the original panelists on her show, Another View, when it began. And so Barbara has been, a dear friend and sister to both of us. So
absolutely. So we were in the lab.
Absolutely, yes.
But look, I appreciate your friendship, and we're this summer, listen up, everybody, because we're doing some new projects together.
Yeah, we're getting the band back together.
Big Ben
in the house.
Getting the band back together.
Hampton's finest.
That's right.
Ben Bailey.
We got our producer, Ben Bailey, who's been with us for, very long time, and we're going to do some good things, but more to come with that. But Will, I mentioned earlier in the intro, we're experiencing a moment in time that I thought we'll never see. It's a moment in time where the civil rights legislation of the 1960s, during LBJ's time, Martin Luther King Jr.'s time, John F. Kennedy, whose vision it was, but of course, due to his assassination, LBJ took that as a mantle and rolled with it.
Great society. Yeah.
And really did a lot of great work, man, on behalf of and for the progress of America, as I said, of America and of democracy, due to the push and the trials and the tribulations and the victories of African Americans.
More perfect union. Yeah.
Absolutely. But Will, that was 19. We look at Voting Rights Act 1965, Civil Rights Act 1964. We can look at the Fair Housing Act and other acts that were passed, but primarily Higher Education Act as well. But if you look at those two, Civil Rights and Voting Rights Act, those were two of the most important pieces of legislation, I believe, passed by our Congress.
Indeed, for citizenship of all of the nation's citizens.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But 1965 and 2025, now we're at 2026, that's a very short time period. And we have a court that's led by the only African-American male on the U.S. Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, right now, that is working actively to turn back and eliminate or nullify the effects of our Voting Rights Act that really help us to be able to vote fair, free, equitable, without intimidation, death, unfair treatment, and for also fair and equitable representation. When we take a look at what took place in the Louisiana case with the U.S. Supreme Court, Louisiana versus Calais, it basically said that you can't use race as a factor in drawing congressional districts or political lines, because I want to make sure that our listeners understand that this just doesn't apply to a congressional seat. But this case applies to state seats as well.
Right.
City council seats or supervisors, wherever you are located, and school board seats, and wherever you get elected.
Right.
Where you have to run in a ward or a district, right, for representation. So this case itself is very important because the effects of it is all the way down to the local level. All politics is local. But more specifically, when you take a look at what happened here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, when it basically the Supreme Court by a 4-3 decision down party lines nullified the vote of 3.1 million people, with of that 3.1, 51.8% or such actually saying yes, to rejoin district lines, congressional lines temporarily.
Majority rules, supposedly.
But the court said no on the definition of an election. Very similarly, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on how Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act should be itself utilized.
Right. Clarence
Thomas said it should never be utilized for race. And he actually said he would have gone further, to eliminate or basically, I would say nullify the impact of the Voting Rights Act itself in 1965. We're going to go, in this show, I want to break down state by state in what's happening. Because I showed you a map earlier.
Fascinating map about the Civil War, the southern states, and the states that we're looking at now with redistricting.
For those of you who, you can go to our website for the university's social media, WNSB social media, and take a look at the advertisement for the show. You will see a map that shows the old map before redistricting, mid-decade redistricting for the Louisiana versus Calais case. And it shows red and blue. Significant amount of blue because those are Democratic congressional lines, districts, and more specifically, Congressional Black Caucus member districts. Look at the new map, and you'll see a speck of blue and massive amounts of red, because this case has allowed states to meet, have emergency sessions, and redraw their lines to eliminate or do the very thing that Voting Rights Act Section 2 was created to do, and that's prevent the dilution or the elimination of African-American or black representation in Congress. When I showed you that map, it was pretty much, I showed you that map and I showed you the map of the Confederate States that seceded from the Union. Was there a difference that you saw?
Very little. To the naked eye, it was like you just superimpose one map over the other, and it's the same territory.
Now, you've been around journalism, politics for decades. I mean, you've seen it. You know, whether you're from New York, you worked in Chicago.
Yes.
You've been down in Hampton Roads,
lived in
D.C.,
lived in Arizona,
Philly,
Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've seen the country for the most part. You know, from your perspective and journalism perspective, how important is the Black Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus more specifically, and what do you believe will be the impact if 15 or 1/3 of the Black Caucus is eliminated because of this one Supreme Court case?
I think the major impact is going to be the voice of that important segment of our population being missing, being absent from the conversations that happen, from the meetings that happen. You know, you need people in the room who represent your interests, whether they have all of the numbers or not, to get a vote passed in your interest. You want to at least have different people representing the different demographics that are in the country. You want them in the room having a conversation so that they can at least influence each other, so all of the issues can be on the table, can be up for discussion. What you're looking at happening is you're going to have a monolithic, from a cultural standpoint, group that's in all of these political positions, supposedly representing a diverse state or a diverse country. And so the conversations that's going to be had now is going to be strictly around those individuals and what their own personal experiences, their own cultural experiences. They're looking at everything from that lens and that lens only. They're not. It takes a really dynamic person who comes from a particular community, particular cultural standpoint, to be able to step back and look at, okay, here's my point of view from my white upper middle class viewpoint.
Right.
But let me step back and look at this policy that we're trying to consider and how it might impact someone from lower white class, low income, rural. I'm from the urban area. What about how can I speak to an issue that's rural if I don't have someone representing that to be part of the conversation? So from a racial standpoint, that just compounds it. If everybody in the room is white and that's it, and no one is really thinking nuanced and how this is going to affect other people outside of their own cultural context, what do you think that the decisions are likely to be? And this is what the Voting Rights Act and all of these other acts that have sought to make us a more perfect union, that's at the core of what they're really about. We were talking on Barbara's show, and I'm saying we're now in this state of America, in this current state of affairs, where we're supposed to believe that what actually happened in history didn't happen, and it ain't happening now. And so we're forgetting, or we're supposed to believe that these rules weren't put in place because what was going on before was it was a majority white male body was making these decisions for this diverse country and absolutely excluding large segments of the population from having equal opportunity, equal rights as citizens. We're forgetting that, and we're now saying, oh, yeah, all of that has changed. Matter of fact, it didn't happen, and it ain't happening, so why do we need these laws now? And that's what I would like to ask Clarence Thomas, is to say, okay, you know the reasoning behind why this legislation was done. Are you saying that going back to the conditions that existed, the situation that existed prior to this, that now everyone is so enlightened racially now that you're not going to begin to have some of the same results that existed prior to 1965? I'd like to hear what is the answer. What is your prescription? If you want to say one man, one vote, don't include race in any of this process thinking, then What is your prescription for putting things back in the past situation and expecting a different result? This is what you're expecting us to believe, that we're going to get a different result in 2026.
Will, it's funny you mention that because part of that decision was we live in a colorblind society.
Exactly.
And how, what again, I'm not, you don't have to be a scholar, right, to get what I'm about to say. But if you eliminate a provision that was created to stop you from doing a certain thing,
right,
but the moment that provision is removed, you go and do the exact same thing that it was created for you not to do, does that mean that you don't need the provision?
Right. Apparently that's what they're saying. They're saying, first of all, you have to prove that there was intent for you to be discriminatory, that your intent of this redistricting or whatever you decide to do, that has to be proven. What you're saying is, okay, if I go back to doing what I was doing and the results becomes what it is, then it proved itself.
Exactly.
So are they saying that we're a colorblind society? I covered the Obama election. Are we sitting here and saying that was the first opportunity we had a black man to become president? Are you saying that in that election, race was not an issue? I would go back and I would say I was there. I covered it. I was in the stadium when he accepted the nomination. I covered it as a reporter. Are we going to sit here and say that race was not part of that process at all? So that's why whites were able to vote for Obama, because they were seeing we were all living in a colorblind society and race was not an issue. Until race is not an issue in this nation, we absolutely need provisions and guardrails in place to prevent race from being an issue in its decisions.
I go back to that decision of when the first Supreme Court case, Shelby County versus Holder, was decided in North Carolina, along with several of the states. Texas was part of that, Virginia. But they enacted provisions in the state legislature in order to make it harder for individuals to vote, more specifically targeting black communities and brown communities. And one thing they did in North Carolina was eliminate certain polling areas, make the time period shorter for you to vote. In Georgia, it was criminal if you gave somebody water or a chair to sit in while they stood in those long lines, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said for North Carolina, which, of course, the base of it is located in the city of Richmond here in Virginia, it said the provisions by the North Carolina legislature was by, quote, surgical precision, unquote, to limit the target African-American voters. By surgical precision. So, I mean, if the court could see that,
right?
Again, it was the wall was put up for you not to go through the wall, not to get on this side. The moment you take the wall down, what do? You don't even wait till the wall's gone.
Exactly.
You cross over to the other side. So again, it's just for persons that believe that we are in a colorblind society, we're not, because the very thing that we put in place to help protect individuals who can't protect themselves with the law and policies that we created, you go right back and do the things that were done decades ago to them. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our redistricting series. Today we're looking at the old and new maps, the state of districts across the country. After the state Supreme Court here in the Commonwealth of Virginia voted down and nullified the vote of the voting referendum, and also the U.S. Supreme Court in Louisiana versus Calais case made it unconstitutional to consider race as a factor in drawing lines, political lines, for this upcoming congressional race and for the midterms in November. The states that were under pre-clearance, mostly the southern states, immediately after their decision started calling special session after special session, redrawing maps after maps, bypassing the voter and doing it in backroom deals with legislators down partisan lines of Republican and Democrats, and being signed into law by Republican governors, and now create a slate of districts that individuals will have to run in that will represent the people of their community. Ironically, many of those communities will not have African-American representation. Joining us to discuss this is my good friend, Dr. Will Levis, who is here to help us break down what's happening state by state. Will, let's go state by state. So let's first of all go with Louisiana. The state of Louisiana is a great state, who was the name of the case that really started to kick this off. Louisiana, following the ruling, the state started redrawing its maps to eliminate the second majority-minority district created in 2024, despite primaries already being scheduled. Now, Governor Landry actually basically stopped the primaries. All right, so they're going to be rescheduled later. They redrew maps. At one point, they thought that they would be able to eliminate the Orleans Parish district, the lone district for years to represent African Americans, where now Troy Carter is currently the U.S. Congressman. As a matter of fact, post-Reconstruction, there have only been 4 African Americans and 4 African American males to represent 1/3 of the state population in Congress. 3 of them came from the Orleans district, 1 from the second minority district, which was Congressman Cleo Fields, which represented that district in the 90s and now in the 2020s, and both have been eliminated by the U.S. Supreme Court. Will, it's a state with over 1/3 population African American that will only now have 1 U.S. Congressman to represent them. You know, again, when you look at race, when you look at the impact that this will have, what do you see for the people of Louisiana?
I think that people have to seriously strategize what is the best course of action regarding what the situation is now that we face. Knowing the past, knowing where we're at right now, I think there needs to be some serious strategic analysis going on with think tanks, with involving institutions and thought leaders, and to map out an appropriate strategy, because each state is a little different in the way that it does its voting business.
Yep.
And so you're not going to have a one-size-fits-all situation. And the Supreme Court, to me, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to be saying we are going to allow states to set things up the way each one of them wants to set it up. And we're going to be very careful about stepping in and overstepping what a particular state wants to do or how it decides to do its voting. And we're going to look at technicalities as much as we can to avoid
answering the substance of the issue.
Right. And so we're not looking at the results of what is actually done. We're going to lock in on the process. Did they define a particular process and follow that process? We're not going to concern ourselves so much with the results of what may come of that process. So when the Supreme Court said, separate but equal is inherently unequal, they were saying that the result of that, even though you may be saying that's not your intent, the result of that is unequal treatment. So anything you're trying to do that involves segregation, the end result is what the problem is, and the end result is what we're legislating against. This court is, with precision, surgical precision, has a different approach, and it wants to not look at what is the result of these decisions being made and the outcome. It's not going to address it there. So it wants to let the states do what the states want to do. So people need to analyze their own state and say, what's the best course of action to get a much more equal, fair, and just result.
Absolutely. So that's Louisiana. After Louisiana, Tennessee called a special session to target simply the District of Memphis. Memphis itself was divided up into 4 parts in order to dilute the representation or the vote of African Americans in that district. Tennessee has been in the news quite a bit, for its equal rights and for its civil rights, of course. You take a look at some of the representatives that were high profile, Pearson and others. Once again, Memphis, where blues was created, Beale Street. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of people moving. A lot of African Americans are moving to Tennessee, especially Nashville. Also, Tennessee State, University, alma mater of Oprah Winfrey, are under attack as well. Again, what does this mean for Memphis, for the state of Tennessee?
I think that they also have to reevaluate the whole party system and how to best navigate and re-empower ourselves within the current system as it is. So, for example, I've said before that the Republican Party experienced a reckoning some years ago. People may remember the Tea Party. And it's ironic that so much of what the Tea Party was about, it was saying it wanted to do, is so much of what MAGA right now, as led by Trump, is not doing. They campaigned on some of those same things about not going to war, about the economy, about America first, so forth and so on. But the actual execution of that is something totally different. So it's almost like they co-opted the messaging of the Tea Party and the so-called passion that was behind it, and then have turned it around and use it for their own interests.
Yeah.
So in that process, there were some Republicans in there that were fiscally responsible people and conservatives and actually believed in that. Well, I think those people need a place right now. Many of them have become independents. And I think the Democrats on the other side have to evaluate the course of action that they've been taking the past 10, 20 years and whether or not that is still actually beneficial. So as black people, you need to be looking at the parties and looking at what has really worked what has really worked in our best interest and reevaluate that. And maybe start looking at how can we vote as blocks that are able to influence and turn elections and create power so that these people who are in power, in these positions of power, will value the vote. Because they only value the vote around money and whether or not you have the ability to vote them out of office.
That's it. We have a few minutes. I want to get through these other two states because it's very significant.
Let's go for it.
Once again, Tennessee, I said 4, split it up into 4, but it's actually 3. The new Republican-driven map splits 61% black 9th district in Memphis into 3 separate districts. That reduces the African-American population in each one. The state of Alabama. It was a case ruled in 2023 where the Supreme Court told them that they were discriminating against African Americans and basically had to create another majority-minority district, which was created. After Louisiana versus Calais, they requested to the court, do we have to obey this decision in 2023 or can we ignore it? The Supreme Court said, guess what? It's okay. You can ignore it. So they are now calling a special session to address their redistricting battle as well, to eliminate that, to vacate that lower court ruling, and then also in order to redraw their districts as well, which will eliminate black representation.
Now, how are they going to make their voices known to these new legislators who are going to come in and represent them? Are you just going to be silent, or are you going to make your presence known to them? Are you going to make them accountable to you? I think that's where the strategy comes. If the new district is in place, how are you going to make the person that's in this district, even though your areas have been divided, how are you going to make them accountable to you?
Yeah. I mean, that's basically where it stands. Again, the U.S. Supreme Court, in validating these redistricting measures by allowing southern states that were the former Confederacy to do as they like in diluting black voices. And finally, Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia is also called a special session, but theirs won't take effect until basically 2028. But South Carolina, there were plans in place by South Carolina in order to target specifically, the only African-American district, which is held by somebody very powerful.
Clyburn,
the kingmaker, Congressman Clyburn, in Columbia, South Carolina. At this point, we had a little setback where some state senators, Republicans, joined Democrats in order to block that, which would make it actually harder for them to eliminate that district. The efforts by these Republicans come in the wake of a decision by, again, the Supreme Court to slash that key provision to protect African Americans from voter dilution. But in trying to advance that, Clyburn this past week remained optimistic that he can still win re-election no matter what happens. He said, quote, "I don't know why people think I could not get reelected if they redistrict South Carolina. I have a district that's about 45% African American. I have no idea what the number will be after the legislature finishes. But whatever the number is, I will be running on my record and America's promise. Trump in social media said on last Monday, urged South Carolina Republicans in all caps, be bold, be courageous. Move the U.S. House primaries to August. Leave the rest on the same schedule. Everything will be fine. All caps, get it done. So, Will, we got our president who is actively involved in state politics.
Yeah.
However, when we have our minority leader of the House who's actively involved in Virginia politics, he's told to get his cotton picking hands off Virginia, right? So,
exactly. Right. What has happened is not happening no more. In fact, it didn't happen. So just forget about it.
Well, man, look, we could talk for hours,
Absolutely.
And we actually tend to do talk for hours. But I thank you for coming in studio in Norfolk. I know you're getting ready to head out of town and go back out of the country pretty soon. Enjoy yourself. But when you get back in the country, come see us again here on Say the Water, where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. Until next time, be good, be great. God bless. Continue to tune in for this ever-changing story. And we'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.